At first glance, it might seem preposterous to compare the notorious adult anime redo of Healer with the critically acclaimed video game Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor. However, when examining their settings, plot structures, and main characters, one can argue that Redo of Healer is a perverse and morally twisted reinterpretation of themes present in Shadow of Mordor. Both narratives revolve around revenge, personal transformation, and the corruption of power, though Redo of Healer twists these elements into a far darker, more morally bankrupt tale. Both stories take place in grim, war-torn worlds brimming with death and despair, but their tones and contexts vary drastically. Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor immerses players in the harsh and treacherous lands of Mordor, a realm corrupted by Sauron's influence. The setting is one of high fantasy, with ancient battles, legendary races, and epic struggles between good and evil. Mordor itself is a battleground where the protagonist, Talion, seeks to dismantle an oppressive system ruled by dark forces. Redo of Healer, in contrast, unfolds in a medieval-inspired fantasy world teeming with abuse, corruption, and moral decay. While the setting includes familiar fantasy tropes like castles, magic, and kingdoms, it is drenched in cruelty, with a particular focus on human depravity. Instead of offering a struggle between good and evil, this world thrives on selfishness, vengeance, and exploitation. The key difference lies in how the settings frame their darkness. Mordor is inherently corrupt, but the story carries a sense of hope and heroism through Talion's quest. Redo of Healer lacks such hope. Its setting amplifies the bleakness, serving as a backdrop for the protagonist's twisted revenge. Both narratives center on revenge, but their execution diverges significantly. In Shadow of Mordor, Talion seeks to avenge the deaths of his family, who were brutally murdered by Sauron's forces. Empowered by the spirit of Celebrimbor, Talion's quest intertwines personal vengeance with the greater goal of liberating Mordor from tyranny. Despite the bloody path he walks, Talion's motives align with justice and the protection of others. His vengeance is tempered by a higher cause. Conversely, Redo of Healer follows Kiaru, a healing magician abused and tortured by those around him. After gaining the power to reset time, Kiaru embarks on a revenge-driven crusade to rewrite his life. However, his vengeance is devoid of moral restraint, encompassing sadistic retribution and exploitation of those who wronged him. Unlike Talion, who fights for freedom and redemption, Kiaru's actions spiral into self-serving depravity. While both plots revolve around protagonists taking control of their fate, the moral compass driving their decisions starkly contrasts. Talion's revenge feels righteous, whereas Kiaru's feels unsettlingly personal and vindictive. Both Talion and Kiaru undergo significant transformations due to trauma, but their responses to pain highlight their differing natures. Talion begins as a grieving ranger, haunted by loss but unwilling to succumb to despair. His partnership with Celebrimbor, though not without tension, represents a fusion of mortal resilience and elven wisdom. Talion fights to reclaim his sense of purpose, using his pain as a tool to dismantle Sauron's forces. Kiaru, on the other hand, becomes the embodiment of his suffering. Manipulated, assaulted, and dehumanized, his trauma twists him into a figure of cold, calculated vengeance. Unlike Talion, who retains empathy and a sense of justice, Kiaru loses all moral boundaries, weaponizing his pain to perpetuate a cycle of cruelty. Both characters are deeply scarred, but their arcs reveal different philosophies. Talion's pain fuels a mission greater than himself, whereas Kiaru's suffering becomes a justification for his descent into moral corruption. Kiaru, the protagonist of Redo of Healer, can be viewed as a twisted amalgamation of the personalities, powers, and goals of both Celebrimbor and Sauron from Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor. While these characters differ vastly in execution, their similarities highlight how Redo of Healer perverts elements of the Shadow of Mordor narrative. By examining their shared powers, ambitions, and personalities, we can see how Kiaru embodies a perverted version of Celebrimbor's tragic genius and Sauron's manipulative darkness. Kiaru, Celebrimbor, and Sauron wield extraordinary magical abilities that allow them to dominate others and reshape reality. Kiaru possesses the rare healing magic that allows him to reverse injuries, manipulate life, and, most importantly, reset time. This ultimate power enables him to undo his past suffering and exact calculated revenge on those who wronged him. However, his abilities are not merely restorative, they also allow him to inflict suffering in ways that mirror the pain he endured, blurring the line between healing and harm. Celebrimbor, the legendary elven smith, harnesses the power of the One Ring and his own spectral abilities to dominate orcs and reshape the battlefield. His powers, particularly the mind-controlling domination mechanic, echo Kiru's ability to manipulate and control others. However, Celebrimbor's use of these powers often serves a strategic purpose rather than personal vengeance. Sauron, the Dark Lord, is the ultimate master of manipulation and domination. His creation of the Rings of Power showcases his ability to bend the wills of others to his own. Sauron's power, like Kiru's, is rooted in total control, reshaping individuals and entire societies according to his desires. Kiru's abilities can be seen as a perverted synthesis of Celebrimbor's craftsmanship and Sauron's mastery of control. While Celebrimbor seeks redemption and Sauron seeks dominion, Kiru uses his powers purely for personal gratification and revenge, exploiting the darkest aspects of both characters' abilities. The goals of these characters share surface similarities, but Kiru's objectives reveal a deeply perverse distortion of Celebrimbor's and Sauron's motivations. Kiru is driven by revenge against those who abused and dehumanized him. His ultimate goal is not to liberate or conquer, but to rewrite the narrative of his life, ensuring that his oppressors suffer as much as he once did. While his quest for control mirrors Sauron's ambitions, it is rooted in deeply personal, vindictive desires rather than grand designs of domination. Celebrimbor is also motivated by revenge, particularly against Sauron, who betrayed him and corrupted his creations. However, Celebrimbor's vengeance is tempered by a broader goal, to weaken Sauron's forces and prevent his dominion over Middle-earth. Sauron seeks absolute control over Middle-earth, motivated by a lust for power and order. Like Kiru, Sauron's ambitions are deeply selfish, and his actions leave a wake of suffering and destruction. However, Sauron's goals are far more expansive, aiming for universal domination rather than personal vengeance. Kiru's goals align more closely with Sauron's than Celebrimbor's, but his actions are far more intimate in scope. His revenge-driven domination mirrors Sauron's use of power to corrupt, but the deeply personal nature of his vendetta twists his ambition into something uniquely perverse. Kiru's personality draws parallels to both Celebrimbor and Sauron, combining elements of their cunning, manipulative nature, and thirst for control. Kiru is intelligent and methodical, carefully orchestrating his revenge to maximize the suffering of his enemies. His cunning and ability to exploit others echo Sauron's manipulative tendencies, while his arrogance and confidence in his own abilities reflect Celebrimbor's pride as a master craftsman. However, Kiru lacks the tragic nobility of Celebrimbor and the grandiosity of Sauron, grounding his personality in pettiness and cruelty. Celebrimbor is a tragic figure, a once noble elf corrupted by his pride and ambition. Though his thirst for vengeance drives him to questionable actions, his ultimate goals remain tied to the greater good. His personality balances brilliance with bitterness, making him a morally complex character. Sauron, by contrast, is pure malice, embodying the desire to dominate and control without remorse. His manipulative charisma and calculating nature make him a master of deception, using others as pawns in his grand schemes. Kiru combines the worst aspects of both characters. He has Celebrimbor's pride without his nobility and Sauron's malice without his grandeur. This results in a protagonist who is not only morally bankrupt but also consumed by his own trauma, turning him into a small-scale tyrant whose world revolves solely around his revenge. Kiru serves as a perverted reflection of Celebrimbor and Sauron, embodying their powers, goals, and personalities in distorted ways. His ability to manipulate and dominate mirrors their magical prowess, but his morally bankrupt quest for revenge strips these elements of their grandeur or nobility. While Celebrimbor seeks restoration and Sauron seeks dominion, Kiru represents the basest interpretation of power, a tool for personal gratification and vengeance. In this way, Redo of Healer distorts the themes and characters of Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor, offering a nihilistic and morally grotesque exploration of similar ideas. Kiaru is not just a perverted version of Celebrimbor or Sauron, he is a reflection of what happens when power and pain are used solely to perpetuate cruelty, making him a darker, smaller, and more unsettling figure than either of his counterparts. At their core, Redo of Healer and Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor share thematic similarities in their exploration of revenge, personal transformation, and the cost of power. However, their execution reveals a stark moral divide. Shadow of Mordor transforms its grim setting into a tale of heroism, purpose, and resistance against oppression, whereas Redo of Healer delves into the depths of depravity, using its dark world to explore unrestrained vengeance. In this sense, Redo of Healer can be seen as a perverted variant of Shadow of Mordor, offering a nihilistic interpretation of revenge without the redemptive qualities found in Talion's journey. Both stories challenge audiences to confront the consequences of pain and power, but they do so in fundamentally different ways, one striving for hope, the other embracing despair.